People on the right are constantly making jokes. Memes are meant to be funny, you laugh. When you participate with Trump supporters or conservatives or people who typically post memes, everything's meant to be a joke. It's all tongue-in-cheek, it's just funny.
The NPC meme is fucking amazing. And not just because it's genuinely hilarious and accurately represents the way that not just left-wingers, but especially SJW types, the far-left types, who are kind of like pre-programmed, but with a certain set of responses.
Using the term NPC to refer to liberals. These people, they said, join the anti-Trump crowd because they're not led by independent thought or conscious to oppose President Trump's policies, but because they're brainwashed with sheep who have been conditioned to parrot left-wing orthodoxy in the manner of a scripted character. They're completely dependent on their programming and can't think on their own. It's totally true. They look with CNN and New York Times saying.
It's meant to poke fun at liberal activists, but the meme itself isn't inherently political. It's just a joke, plain and simple. And what it looks like is, you could argue this is conservative activism. They're going on Twitter to spread an idea that they think is funny, but kind of makes a point.
But maybe these NPCs really aren't human. Maybe they just like basic bitch social trends and banal popular culture as a default effort, as a way of just trying to blend in. After all, what else could explain the success of The Big Bang Theory and How I Met Your Mother?
And now this meme is setting off the alarm bells at Twitter's Censor Central because it is so powerful, as it articulates the fact that many of the people that we interact with on a daily basis appear to have been programmed on how to behave, act, speak, and most importantly, think in the exact same way.
Is it a joke? Is it not? Is it just a childish way to avoid criticism?
What happens to kids who react to playground insults? They get the same insult thrown at them again and again. Playground insults.
Because it is so powerful.
Playground insults.
Do you guys genuinely act in that kind of predictable fashion?
Playground insults.
You could argue this is conservative activism.
What is consciousness? Who are we on the inside? Who is we?
You are a social justice warrior. You are a beta new male snowflake. You are a cuckold. You are a soy boy. You are an NPC.
Let's talk about the dead-ass meme.
Yes, if you've been keeping up with news blogs and the trending memes of social media, you've likely seen some variation of this pop up on your feed. A little grey man with a blank expression, humorously pretending to be a person. Very endearing, very cute. Yet, somehow, this unassuming cartoon lad has come to have some kind of political association, even apparent political significance, sweeping across the web space like any number of smug frogs and soy boys. The subject of many a nuclear political take, flooding the social media space with thousands of fake accounts, seemingly out of nowhere, the NPC. To try and figure out how we got here, and why I keep getting called one on Twitter, like any good researcher, I decided to log on to knowyourmeme.com. What better place to get a brief overview of what this NPC thing is all about. I have a theory that there are only a fixed quantity of souls on planet Earth that cycles continuously through reincarnation. However, since the human growth rate is so severe, the soulless extra walking flesh piles around us are NPCs, or ultimate normal fags, who autonomously follow groupthink and social trends in order to appear convincingly human. According to the Know Your Meme page, this meme, playing off of the term NPC for the mindless computer people found in most video games, first kicked off with this post over on 4chan's video game board, a pseudo conspiracy theory that found new life with the discovery of a damning 2011 study which found, against all odds, that only 26% of a stratified sample of college students had the capacity for inner speech, and that therefore they had no capacity for self-awareness nor introspection. Except, well, did it find that? On reading through the work of Russell T. Hurlburt, who headed this research, it appears that we have a case here of a pseudo-scientific extrapolation being made based on a series of premises that don't really come to this conclusion. In essence, while Hurlburt is critical of the assumption that inner speech is a universal psychological phenomenon, he leaves it pretty up in the air about whether this really means anything as far as the cognitive capacity of the participants. Which makes sense. Visualization, the cognitive function that allows you to create detailed images in your head, is also something that varies wildly in terms of people's capacity to utilize it. Even artists often lack the capacity to visualize vivid images in their brain, but this says nothing about their intelligence or their self-awareness, and it certainly doesn't suggest that they are less than another human just because their method of mental processing differs from anyone else. This, at best, feels like a massive rhetorical leap using the vague aesthetic of science to make cheap shots at those you disagree with. Oh wait, did I say feels like? Because I actually got in touch with Hurlburt himself and whoops, yep. Even the guy doing the research this whole theory was based around doesn't find any connection between the inner voice and critical thinking ability.
I love how she calls it crackpot social theory. It's like, this is kind of like someone on 4chan had an actually really good idea.
Wow, so just entirely made up conclusions based on a poor understanding of academic research?
Is soy food consumption turning men into pussies and making them
hear
more likely to adopt...
But I'm getting ahead of myself. So how does the NPC meme go from 4chan conspiracy theories to one of the most overused right-wing smears on social media? Well, you see, on July we had the 4chan thread, and then on September 15th, someone called it a fascist dog whistle. Then, on October 5th, Kotaku put out an article saying it was an attempt to demonize the left. And there we have it. Wait, what? The top comment, rather reasonably, poses the question, how do you get from NPC to fascism? And indeed, how on earth do you get from a silly meme that's really just a roundabout way of calling someone stupid to something with a legitimate political dimension to it? Certainly, if you're going off of an article like this, that's a question you're going to struggle to answer. And therein lies the point. Allow me to introduce lying by omission, a concept I'm sure you're all familiar with, in which you lie to someone not necessarily by telling them something you know to be false, but by pretending you don't know the truth when in fact you do. Why am I defining it if you probably already know what it is? Well, because the NPC game is predicated on trying as hard as possible to erase that entire concept from your head, and it's only by removing this fact that feigned ignorance is a form of dishonesty that allows the NPC game to function. So what do I mean by that? Well, as an example, this Know Your Meme page. Now, if you've actually been keeping up with all the NPC forced memery, you know the answer to the question of what NPCs have to do with far-right politics. Well, because as a meme, it's been widely adopted by the far right, specifically to try and discredit moderate or left-wing arguments without having to do the work of actually responding to them. Don't believe me? Here's a compilation, set to very funny music. Yes, while the NPC at face value appears to just represent anyone who doesn't think critically about their beliefs, it's overwhelmingly used in a very specific way by a very specific group. And through its usage, it's come to embody certain ideas larger than itself, like basically any symbol. Would you know that reading this page? Obviously not, because it literally skips from its early July roots in video game forums right to webzine think pieces declaring it a tool for propaganda. Now the thing is, it is a tool for propaganda, like really obviously. It's used for very little other than to utterly caricature the talking points of pretty much anyone to the left of Richard Spencer. It's hard to get much more propaganda-y.
Because it's memes that threaten them the most.
Now, did whoever wrote this include that part of the meme in its summary? Of course not. Did they just not know about it? Also, of course not. Again, it's genuinely really difficult to find an NPC meme not specifically in the context of a far-righter or a Trumpist trying to attack ideas to their left. They lied by omission, and they did it so we'd get top comments like this that just don't get how we arrive from silly gamer meme to far-right propaganda, and, by extension, will now see any opposition to that propaganda as totally overblown and based on nothing. I already know a certain chunk of commenters who will immediately brush off this video since it's just a meme, and to that I say, the safe word is burrito, and if you don't use it in your comment, I know you didn't even make it this far. But consider this hypothetical. Imagine a story in which I'm walking my dog. Someone kicks them as they walk past, so I kick off with them. Now, take away the context where someone kicks my dog. Now suddenly what am I? You'd think I was being completely irrational. Flying off the handle over nothing, I'm just attacking a bloke because he walked past me. The framing is such that now what was an understandable progression of events has turned me into this completely hysterical, unreasonable creature. And that, my friends, is the NPC game. The context of the light-hearted meme is used as a cover to make clear attacks and criticisms of the political ideas of those you disagree with, ergo propaganda, but then that context allows you to quickly relinquish responsibility for those arguments when they're responded to.
It's just a joke, plain and simple.
Thus, your opponent perpetually seems to be making something out of nothing when they take the point for what it is, and you have the plausible deniability of pretending you had no idea it was more than a harmless joke. Many adopting the tactic seem to think it's a pretty genius ploy, but basically, it's the political equivalent of this.
I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you.
So, now we know the game, why is all this happening, and why in this form? Well, the simple answer would be that there's always people in any political movement, especially on the more fringe edges, that are willing to try a dirty trick to gain influence and power in a place where something more sensible or inoffensive just isn't going to get you anywhere. Why pose rational arguments against those to your left when you can just say they have brains that don't work so good? But this goes deeper than that, and to really understand why this specific form has come about, what we need is to understand the NPC. Who is the NPC? What does it want? What does it feel? Can it love? Can it hate? Well, in examining this, we'll hopefully... Oh god, no.
NPCs. Poor little guy tuckered himself out. Anyway, I can take over while we wait for him to recharge. Hi, I'm Curio. I'm going to talk about how fascists work. If you don't know that the NPC meme is being created, shared, and perpetuated by fascists, it is? It is. According to Umberto Eco, who literally wrote the book on fascism, fascists have to make their enemies out to be simultaneously weak and strong. Weak so that they can justify their superiority over them, and strong so they can explain why they're an urgent threat that has to be destroyed right now. Fascism as an ideology is just power for the sake of power, and that propaganda tactic is right in line with that. Just say and do anything to get and hold power, even if the things you say and do contradict each other. So your enemies are simultaneously weak and strong. Bear that in mind. The left has been stereotyped as hysterical SJWs for a while, but all of a sudden we're heartless robotic NPCs? What happened? Well, for one thing, it's saying things that are completely contradictory in order to gain power, but for another, it marks a progression. Screeching SJWs are trying to censor everyone. They're weak because they're emotional, and they're strong because... universities? The NPCs, on the other hand, are weak because they're emotionless. Do you see what happened? The weakness of the enemy became the point of strength, the thing to be proud of. In the capacity contract, Stacey Clifford Simpleton talks about communities of vulnerability and communities of strength. Communities of vulnerability are united by some sort of common problem or need. Think the Breakfast Club. Communities of strength are united by some kind of common perceived strength. Think the Galactic Empire. Usually, communities of vulnerability have been on the left and communities of strength have been on the right. But recently, fascist recruiters have been using what we could call communities of perceived vulnerability, or lies, to unite people, usually young white men, and draw them slowly but surely to the far right. Now, it's not that those guys have no problems, it's just that the fascists are lying to them about what their problems really are and what the causes of those problems really are. Now, though, the fascists need to draw them into a community of strength. It won't do for your boys to be sitting around sharing depression memes. They have to be proud of something if you want them to get out and do fashy stuff. Look at that guy. So proud. So the fascists are trying to draw everyone into a community of strength, and the NPC meme is a part of that? Well, yeah. No, yes, really. Apart from the obvious concern that calling your political opponents NPCs dehumanizes them and makes their lives worth less than yours, a very common fascist rhetorical tactic, by the way, it also reinforces the validation you get from your beliefs. Vihart has a great video about this, but Peter Coffin has covered the subject a lot, and he calls this kind of group a validation gang. They need to have their beliefs validated over and over, and they stay in the group for that validation. No one is safe from exclusion if they target or are seen to target the source of the validation, not even the thought leaders. The NPC meme is this concept come to life, especially because a part of the meme is that anyone who questions the NPC meme, they're probably an NPC too, right? So how effective is this? How worried should we be? I mean, if it's effective at the actual obvious goal, then quite worried? Convincing your followers that the left aren't human and don't count as people is kind of mass shooter bait? But memes are really hard to track, and it's impossible to tell how effective it's being. InfoWars is holding a meme-making contest for NPC memes, and famous soy enthusiast Paul Joseph Watson is trying to gather all the NPC memes he can. But the alt-right has tried to force memes before to not much avail. I don't know, on a scale from 0 to everybody panic, it's a very scared shrug?
When you participate with Trump supporters or conservatives or people who typically post memes, everything's meant to be a joke. It's all tongue-in-cheek. It's just funny. But the left is extremely serious. You can see how they interact on social media, constantly trying to police language, ban hate speech, telling people they can or can't do things. So if you're on the left, you're constantly walking on eggshells, never knowing what is or is not acceptable. Whereas on the right, everything's just a joke to begin with. So today,
So yes, a hesitant shrug it is, since after all, this is just another in a long line of right-wing rhetorical forced memes. And just as soon as everyone realizes how embarrassingly clearly it displays the far-right penchant for childish gotcha tactics over any real substantive criticism of those who oppose, it'll go to the wayside and...
Bots.
Huh?
Bots.
What do you want?
Your side has been
What?
calling us Russian bots for the past year, and that's exactly the same thing.
Okay, let's talk about this one. As illustrated by a good boy Curio there, the dehumanizing, alienating nature of the NPC meme is right in line with traditional right-wing tactics to invent a monstrous outgroup that you can just pin all of your societal ills on while subtly, not really that subtly, suggesting that they genuinely are less human than you are. Yeah, it's not something those on the left are free from either, or at least not something I can write off as only a right-wing thing without critically analysing it. So, 2 examples come to mind that I'm going to go into here. One that I don't think holds much merit, one that I do. Russian bots and vampires. In case you haven't been keeping up with it, the first was a label used liberally on social media from 2016 to 2018, which laid claim to the notion that many apparent genuine conservatives were actually either spam bots or hired trolls working from Russia, with the intent of influencing global politics. Like a James Bond film. On a surface level, there's certainly a comparison to be made between the left's labelling of right-wing accounts as bots and the right's labelling of left-wing accounts as NPCs. A key detail, to me, makes this angle less legitimate than the other example I had in mind. That Russian bots are... real? Hang about, stop writing your angry response. I'm not denying many have jumped the gun on the Russian bot thing and elected to throw it around as an accusation pretty much whenever a particularly outlandish far-right opinion is being argued, with notable instances of this backfiring. Ian56 and Partisan Girl were 2 Twitter accounts mislabeled by UK officials as bots before revealing themselves to actually, well, not be. Just your regular old 9/11 truther, the Jews orchestrated the Holocaust, extremist political pundits. Not bots, maybe trolls, but probably not Russian. Yet the fact remains that, as reported, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Russian spam accounts were discovered, and there is a great amount of legitimacy to the notion that there was a calculated attempt to influence the world stage through social media in this way. Which isn't really surprising. A lot of people get their news exclusively through social media nowadays. If you can exploit that to spread mass disinformation, why not, eh? This is all in sharp contrast to NPC, which is at best an abstract buzzword. Unless you really are one of those 4chan conspiracy theorists that thinks the current political climate is because of a shortage of souls. This isn't me saying it's fine to jump the gun on this stuff, just maybe, I don't know, there's a difference between mistakenly branding John Smith 69455 a Russian troll when he spams in broken English about how Hillary Clinton is a pedophile, versus saying someone you're arguing with lacks sentience because they're worried about transgender people losing their legal rights. Which is happening, by the way. Finally, I come to an example introduced to me by a young Harry Boomer guy that perhaps gets more to the heart of what's really being gotten at with NPC. See, as we move past the facade of innocent memery, past horrid fake science that tries to justify the label, past the vague attempt to conflate a crude insult with an actual global security issue, as we get past the illusion of any quote-unquote legitimate justification, what we get is pure spin, framework. When Karl Marx in Capital Volume 1 referred to capitalists as consuming the labour of the worker vampire-like, this is something he was doing, to some extent. Vampires had long existed as a cultural icon, all-powerful shadowy beings that sucked the blood of the unknowing peasant class, and obviously in comparing the upper-class capitalists to them, he wasn't literally saying they were immortal bloodsuckers, just as I'm sure many right-wingers aren't literally calling leftists soulless husks when they label them NPCs for repeating similar talking points. It's not some kind of real accusation of identity, but an attempt to use fictional archetypes to reframe how you think about a group. In both cases, there is a deliberate dehumanizing element to these framing devices, which I acknowledge, but maybe we should think about what specifically these devices are trying to communicate. What are they trying to motivate the audience to believe? With vampirism, it's a comparison that attempts to define the action of the capitalist exploiting the worker in a raw and visceral way. By exposing the one-sided and manipulative nature of the working relationship, it's painting an easy-to-understand picture of how the capital system works. What is NPC trying to do, if it isn't just a joke, which we know it isn't? Now that we know it isn't a legitimate accusation, at least not without being based on conclusions not even the original researcher agreed with, the goal of the NPC game, as I've mentioned before, is to make the expression or belief of any viewpoint that this select group disagrees with seem shallow, seem uninformed, without critical thought and detached from reality. All without ever having to take your opponent seriously and communicate why you disagree with them. It's not about reconsidering the systems we live under in society. Instead, what it's about is eliminating discussion, eliminating nuance, and attempting to frame the weak positions of the far right as, somehow, the only reasonable choice. As an arbitrary label thrown at moderates and the left, it's just one of many gone, and many to come. But as an idea symbolic of the lazy political tactics employed by this group in the current day, I can't think of one much more representative of that than that of the NPC. Final note that, hey, if you're a lefty and you think the best way to counteract the NPC meme is to co-opt it and start using it against right-wingers, could you consider not... Look, I get it, it's such juicy bait to point out that maybe the people who've spent the last 2 years using the same weird animal or object in a suit avatars to make the same poorly thought out political arguments might be the ones lacking individuality or critical thinking.
I take exception to that, you cuck.
But when it comes to NPC, as an implicit suggestion that the people you disagree with are legitimately inferior to you on some base genetic level, it so fundamentally goes against leftist politics that all you're doing is, at best, adopting their mindset, and at worst, contributing to the ongoing right lean of the Overton window. You might as well start calling people you disagree with low IQ, and if you don't get what's so bad about associating people's personal flaws with genetic inferiority, go check out my video about Disney's fascist eugenics. Too long didn't watch, genetic hierarchy legitimizes social hierarchy, and social hierarchy is how we get oppression, regardless of whether you personally support that. Which, you know, speaking of NPCs. Anyhow, I hope this made sense. This isn't supposed to be comprehensive, but just a way of going over this phenomenon before it disappears into the ether and gets replaced by the next thing. And the best thing about the predictability of the far right is you can basically just rewatch this video when that happens, but swap NPC for the new term and it'll work just as well, so that's fun. If you like the video, please consider donating to my Patreon link below. Even $1 or $2 can help make this process easier. There's also coffee if you want to throw a one-time donation, but fair warning, that money will be spent on eggnog, not coffee. Please also check out Curio, the fella who helped me with this video. He's a tiny channel, but I love his content, and I bet you will too. Link also in the description. He just did a video on Bloodborne's strange political connections. It's great, feel free to check it out. Finally, I'd like to thank all my patrons, Alba, Alex Wenberg, Kristen Rawes, Michael Q. Warnock, Peter Coffin, and Varisha Jairus, with a very, very special thanks to my best peeps, Latir and Nick Schwartz. It's you folks that keep this channel going. If you liked the video, please share it on Reddit or Twitter or Facebook or whatever. And of course, remember to subscribe and hit that bell button if you want to stay updated on future work. As always, love you all, stay safe, and remember